We put about 1,300 miles on this old girl for our Roanoke River cruise trip, camping extraordinaire. And I noticed a slight vibration. The last 50 to 100 miles. So I think it's time to go ahead and do a wheel bearing check, repack, and see what we got. So I'm checking the tire tread here, and it seems to have worn pretty evenly. But that's never a good sign. That would tell me that there's more than likely the grease seal, which is behind the hub here, is leaking and throwing grease. As that hub spins thousands of RPMs, or thousands of rotations rather, the grease heats up and it lubricates just like it's supposed to. But yeah, it shouldn't be coming out the back of the wheel. So let's take it apart. So we need to remove the castle nut now, and to do that, we have to take out the carter pin, which is pretty easy. I'm glad I see a carter pin here, because a lot of times you'll see a nail. That's never good. Okay, so not a lot of play in that. I like to see that a little tighter, but that's kind of a personal preference there. So castle nuts removed. Take the bearings off and look. Oh, actually, doesn't look too bad. Again, it wasn't leaking that bad, but you sure don't want them throwing grease. Not a cheap fix, but it sure is better than losing an axle, because that's the alternative. So they don't see any grooves or wear marks on the axle, so that's a great sign. But I do notice it slid back a little farther than it should, I think. This is a little suspect. That shouldn't be worn like it is. That would explain why the castle nut was loose a little bit too. So yeah, I'm thinking we've got some excessive wear here. We'll carefully knock these out and the grease fitting and see what we've got in there. Get something a little better diameter. Fit down in there and try it. Okay, so we've removed those pieces, and yeah, yeah, we don't want it doing that. That would explain the lip and the wear on this grease seal. So I think it's pretty safe to assume that the bearing, at least I hope it's not going back that far. I don't see any damage on the bearing, so the bearing would have held it, but the grease seal was failing for sure. And that would probably give us our vibration, because that was rubbing pretty good on the axle there. I have typically found what I needed. Tractor Supply with these. They have pretty decent selection. Rural King would be next, to the stores in our area. that would carry such a monster. We'll keep them, put them in a little Ziploc bag, and put them in our boat box because you never know when you blow one out on the road. You saw it's not hard with a simple tool bag. You can replace this on the side of the road. God forbid, but again, every once in a while, check those wheels. If there's any excessive heat or if you see grease dripping, you know you got a problem. You need to remedy it before you lose this axle, because you sure don't want to burn up an axle, and it will burn up. I mean, it'll weld itself together to where all of this will have to be replaced, or you just scrap the trailer. So we'll just continue this until tomorrow, until we get the right parts and see what the Great Dane's barking at. So I'll take a moment and show you that shiny metal part is the race. There's two. That part right there, right at the tip of my finger. Those, I would remove those as well. When you buy a bearing kit, you get two new races. This is where the bearing actually sets and seats. Um, Typically, they don't wear. They can, but if the bearing's in good shape, then it's generally assumed that the race is good as well. But since we're doing a how-to here, I'll go ahead and I will knock both of these out, and I'll use something that won't score the inside of this hub, but you want to knock it from the back side. So this race here, we knocked out this way. So I'm going to take it over to the vise and do that now. I forgot, this is a how-to video, so I was going to do this over at the vise, but I need to do it here so that you get the advantage of seeing how to take a race out. Again, this is backyard mechanic stuff, so if you've got a device that makes this easier, then by all means, I'd use it. So what I'm doing is I'm tapping on the back of the race. Again, I don't want to burr the hub, so I'm very careful with this flathead not to dig in. So that's why I'm having a little bit of trouble here, because the flathead isn't sharp at all. So, and I'm just trying to catch the backside lip of that race to knock it out. And I can see it already start to move. So I'll do that and show you what it looks like when it comes out. So as you're knocking the race out, you can look here and see whether it's moving or not, because it will be uneven. When you rotate this hub around, you can see the distance isn't even all the way around. So you want to just keep rotating it so that you knock it out even. The more even you knock it out, the faster it'll come out. It won't be in such a bind. So just rotate it and try not to get too aggressive with it again, because you don't want to reseat that metal. So that gap's gotten a lot smaller there. So now we're making progress. So we'll just keep tapping it, and we'll keep rotating it. And if you do scratch or score where the race seats, then just take a piece of emery cloth and clean it and put it back. So, okay, so now we're hitting flush on the concrete. So I need to take it over to the vise. And what I'm going to do is just tap the back side of this some more and pop that out. So I don't have good light over at the vise, or I'd take the camera over. Okay, so we got them out. I don't know why the first one's always harder to get out than the second one. Maybe it sees the first one give up and it just decides it's not worth the fight. Anyway, yeah, not so funny. Those are races. And the bearings actually sit down inside those. And that's what they spin against, so that they have a nice machine surface inside the hub. So we will get bearings tomorrow. 2 races for the bearings to set into. Let's see if I can do this a little better. For the bearings to set into. and a grease seal, which of course goes on the back of the hub like that to keep the grease from leaking out onto the back of the wheel like that. Grease. No bueno. Yeah, that's some Spanish. A little bit of twang. Okay, so of course when we go to put everything back, we want it extremely clean. And we'll grease everything and make sure that there's no burrs on the spindle there. If there is, of course, some emery cloth and work it down. So we got a chance to get our bearing set. Here it is. It's a 1-inch set. I believe this came from Tractor Supply. Bearing. Make sure it fits your spindle snugly, which it does. And it spins a whole lot better than the old ones. So now we need to put the races back in, which we discussed earlier. That would be this part here. And they need to go in the proper orientation so that the bearing fits flush, like so. It's the taper it's critical. So we'll take it back to the bench, and we'll very gently hammer this in place on both sides. I mean by that, front and back. Once we get the races in, then we'll seat the bearings and make sure everything runs smoothly. Okay, so to the workbench. Get the bearing kit now. Yeah, first thing, throw the bearing in the floor in the dust. Anyway. Okay, so we want to make sure that that sets on this lip. The contamination will really wear those bearings down over time. Or immediately, depending on what the contamination is. All right. Again, see the lip? The smaller diameter goes in first so that the bearing can seat like such. All right, let's do it. So I've got it started. It's pretty even all the way around, but I still need to knock it down. I don't know how well this camera's going to pick it up. To this seat here. This bearing race needs to be all the way down to this seat so that the bearing fits in it like so. Back to gently tapping this down without nicking or marring the walls of this, because if you do, then those bearings won't have a good place to seat and to roll. So as smoothly as possible. The odds of this socket fitting that diameter perfectly are 1,000,000 to 1, but I'm going to remember that because that really did a good job seating that bearing race inside the lip there. So without marring it, because it went edge to edge when I hammered it in. So now we have the bearing in its seat, in a really good seat. It should be good to go. Let's do the back side now. We'll flip it over and do the very same thing on the back of the hub. And let's rub a little bit of old grease on it. It never hurts. Even though that's certainly not a moving part. It's moving when we seat it, so a little bit of old grease sure couldn't hurt it. Okay, so to get it started, normally I hate going metal to metal, and what I mean by that, hammer to steel, but that is honestly the best way to tap this on all four corners here, because if one side gets ahead of the other, you'll have to knock it back out and start over. So just watch it, feel it, kind of work it down. Now once it's below the level of the hub, use a piece of wood here to flush it. Now that it's flushed, again, lining up perfectly here so that we don't get down inside the race itself. Back and forth. Tap it. Do not let one side get ahead of the other, or it's going to get in a bind. You can feel it. There, just hit the seat. So I know it's all the way down. Tap it all the way around to make sure. Good. We've got a good seat. So now it's time to put the bearings in there. little bit of grease on the race, because we'll pack it full of grease with the bearing buddy. There's a grease reservoir in between these two races. Pull out the second bearing, grease it as well, inside the diameter, and set it down in its seat. The grease fitting for it in place. And tap it down as well. Not too hard, Thad. See, I got it started too far on the other side. So pull it back out. You don't want to bend these. Tap, 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 tap. Pulling around. Now, there we go. There would. Okay, good deal. So the lip on the back of the spindle will hold that bearing in place. So let's go fit it and see if it actually works. Don't know till you try it. So we'll tighten that castle nut down. Then I go as tight as I can, holding the hub, like so, and then back it off maybe a quarter turn, because I want that hub to spin freely. I don't want a lot of frictional drag, because your carter pin's going to hold it anyway. And I think just for the sake of trying to do this right, I'll go get the new carter pin and put it in instead of using the old one. Okay, so the carter pin goes in the hole here in the side of the spindle. So just line it up so that you can get it through. Right there. All the way through, a little tap. Tap, 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 tap. You want it to clear this lip because you may, well, when you put your bearing buddy back on, or a cap, you want to make sure that it can get past this here, the top of the carter pin. So, same with this side. Roll it, bend it in a little bit, and tap it so that you don't have to fight to get that bearing buddy or cap past it. So we'll go to the extreme on this side, and then hammer it down. And then, of course, we'll bend the second part of the carter pin the other direction as well. Because there's nothing worse than beating on these, trying to get the cap on there. So we want to make sure we get it, then knock it back in. Okay, so bearing buddy. Let's clean it out. Get it ready to go back on. Again, check. Yeah. Good deal. Nice and smooth. Tap it easy because we're metal to metal. You can see a line here on the bearing buddy. Once you've seated to that line, you know you'll get a good grease seal. And if you have a rubber mallet, you sure wouldn't go wrong using it here. I should be horsewhipped for hitting it with metal. Okay, so we heard it get a little change in pitch there, and it's seated. So now I'll get the grease gun, and we will fill that hub full of grease. Okay, fill the grease going in. The little plunger in the center of the grease, or excuse me, the center of the bearing buddy, you'll see it collapse that spring. That tells you that you've got that hub full of grease. You don't want to collapse it all the way out because you want to give it room for expansion if it needs to. So we'll just keep pumping the grease to it until we see it start to compress that spring on the bearing buddy. Double check, everything's seated nice. Put the cap on. Now one thing I want to take the time to do as well, when you put these caps on, you got to kind of burp them too. I see them on the road all the time at work. It's funny because, see, this one's going to be a poo-poo now. There, hear the air come out of it, kind of burp it. That way it'll suck itself in and won't come off. Well, shouldn't come off. But no, what I was saying is I want to make sure that I take some cleaner and really clean the inside of this wheel out. That way it'll tell me if I've fixed my problem or not. If I put the wheel back on dirty, it'll be hard to tell if it's leaking grease. So, we'll clean this really well. Put the tire back on and call.